Hey, good morning to the city of Los Angeles, especially the people of Los Angeles. And today is Friday, August 1st, 2025. And on this day, I want to catch you up on all things immigration and immigration enforcement in Los Angeles since the events of June 6th. Because just in case you're catching up for the first time today, it has been just about since June 6th that so-called immigrations and customs enforcement has essentially terrorized brown communities in particular all across Los Angeles County, especially on the southeast portion, but also coming as far west as East Hollywood and stretching even beyond that into the west side into the west side, because I've also learned of anecdotes with respect to folks being abducted there. So basically, it has been a nightmare for anyone who may call themselves or may be called an immigrant throughout Los Angeles, as well as for their family members since June 6th. And it was not just a time in which folks were scared for no reason. They were scared for good reason. You saw social media blowing up left and right in terms of videos showing masked ICE agents or supposedly masked ICE agents, because they may or may not have been agents, since a lot of the folks conducting the abductions did not even so much as identify themselves, showed no badge number, stated no name, provided no info as to how their actions might be held accountable, and so on and so forth. And essentially, then, what folks came to realize is that the behavior by ICE in these raids, in these racial dragnets, in stopping people on the street based solely on their skin color or their occupation, what folks came to realize was that the behavior was entirely unconstitutional. And so, what ended up taking place then is by July, just a little under a month after everything began on June 6th, at the beginning of July, the ACLU filed a lawsuit along with public counsel representing 5 defendants, as well as a number of different organizations, including CHIRLA, which is the leading organization for immigration defense in Los Angeles, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights in Los Angeles. And they filed a lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security, asking for a restraining order on these racial dragnets in particular, asking for a restraining order on ICE agents stopping people on the street or showing up to Home Depots and essentially rounding anyone up who they thought might be of vulnerability. And so, about a week after that, the restraining order was in fact granted. So, advocates really won in a huge way, at least temporarily, since the restraining order held and still holds that ICE cannot engage in racial profiling between now until at least September 24th, when a longer, more consequential hearing will be held. And so this is a win for countless families out there, that's for sure. But naturally, the Trump administration and Stephen Miller and these fascist goons of theirs filed an appeal. And so what we're going to go through today, at least, is the hearing on that appeal. This is a hearing which took place just earlier this week on July 28th in San Francisco at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And so we're going to take a look at that. But before we do, let's just be sure that we can review the timeline for a second, one more time, just for your reference. So Immigrant advocates filed a lawsuit in early July accusing or really pointing out the fact that the methods deployed by ICE and Border Patrol and its subsidiaries was, in fact, unconstitutional and a violation of the U.S. Constitution, which affords rights and privileges to all people in the U.S., not just citizens, as we noted in our earlier installment of JT the LA Storyteller podcast. The lawsuit sought that temporary restraining order, which was granted by a U.S. District Judge FRIMPONG, on July 11th. And then attorneys with public counsel, as well as the ACLU, also alleged or pointed out the fact that detainees were being denied access to an attorney while incarcerated. And on this point, just for your knowledge, it is a fact that in its formal response or in its formal request for an appeal of the restraining orders passage, the Trump administration and the federal government did not deny that they were in fact preventing or depriving people of access to an attorney. There was no formal declaration against this allegation, just FYI. The lawsuit also seeks to stop the roving patrols of agents that the plaintiffs claim are detaining people without warrants or probable cause. No warrants, no warrants, no warrants. Warrants are required per the Constitution, as we also noted in our earlier installment of JT the LA Storyteller podcast. And last but not least, an attorney for the federal government denied everything wholesale. And that's what we're going to go through in this hearing. So let's go ahead and check it out, starting with about the first 3 minutes of exactly that. Let's go ahead and see what the attorney has to say regarding the allegations.
Likelihood of imminent harm in the future. So even if you kind of get past that first issue, I don't think you can get past the second issue.
I thought.
Sorry, go ahead, Nora.
Well, go ahead. You go ahead.
The plaintiffs, all in terms of the cases that distinguish, the plaintiffs mostly rely on two, LaDuke and Melendrez. And there are, I think, a couple of important differences between this case and both of those. The first is.
Also, quick side note, it's just so funny how the representative for the federal government is standing in this totally barren room that looks like it's stuck in the 1950s somewhere. I mean, as opposed to Attorney Tajzar's room, where the light is natural and where you've got a handful of colors and and even a bookshelf that you can see. I don't know why the federal government would choose to look so dry, so cold, so detached. But hey, to each their own, I suppose. I just had to say for a quick second, what a throwback. And that's kind of what this comes down to, actually. Okay, back to it.
In both of those cases, the defendants admitted the policy that was being challenged. In this case, the defendants squarely denied the policy that plaintiffs claim exists. That's at docket numbers 71-1 and 71-2 in the district court. And the district court here did not find an official policy.
Okay. And so just to get us going for a second, I want to point out how here the attorney for the federal government can't bring himself to say we deny the allegations. He speaks about the federal government in the passive sense, saying the federal government, or saying specifically the defendants, which is the federal government in this case, deny the existence of a policy. That is a policy of racial profiling as they terrorize Los Angeles. So it's just interesting that even as he makes a defense of the federal government, he can't bring himself to say, we deny these allegations, because who would want to side with an obviously guilty party, as is the case here. I know I wouldn't, and clearly this attorney has his own issues with exactly that. Now, let's just, in the interest of time, move through this somewhat quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on any one clip because there are a good handful of them. And in this second clip, I want to note to you the way that basically the court here is looking to learn about whether the policy of racial profiling is in fact at play. And what the attorney's position ends up being, by and large, is that, hey, you know what, like, no directive to racially profile has been provided. So therefore, we cannot possibly be accused of racially profiling. Of course, that's not true, because in practice, what your actions look like, as the old saying goes, that speaks louder than your words. That's what brought about the lawsuit in the first place. But the attorney, once again, makes a wholesale, unilateral rejection of the allegations. Let's hear it in his own words for a second, though.
A little unclear, Your Honor. It's not just that she said no written policy. I understand, it doesn't need to be written. But the court said that in footnote 33, the district court said, court finds this pattern of conduct is sufficient evidence, even if there is no official policy to engage in roving patrols. And then later in the footnote said, although there is no testimony from defendants' field agents with respect to the policy being carried out on the streets, the court finds, based on evidence that is before the court, plaintiffs have sufficiently shown that defendants' policies are being carried out differently. For this reason, the court also finds it's not dispositive that plaintiffs have not pointed to any official policy that authorizes or ratifies the alleged roving patrols. So,
okay. So here, the attorney for the federal government is actually citing the case which originally brought about the TRO, or the restraining order. And by his own admission, basically, the fact of the matter is that the court itself found a pattern in practice. So he somehow takes that very text and says, even though they're pointing out that there is a definite pattern here, they're also saying that they found no directive. So it's like the government took that sheet, which Stephen Miller basically brought to the White House in late May, threw it down the garbage, and said, don't tell anyone, and make sure that if someone does find out, you just point out how they have no paperwork to show for it. Nonetheless, do what you got to do. Get those 3,000 people a day. Get those 3,000 arrests a day. Here, the attorney's saying, because you can't find that memorandum, hey, we can't possibly be racially profiling. I don't see where the written order for it is. And that's the epitome of grandstanding. That's the epitome of wasting everyone's time here, actually, because this is supposed to be a defense that shows how there is going to be irreparable harm caused, according to the Trump administration, by having ICE and Border Patrol abide by the Constitution. And yet this says nothing about that. This attorney's defense here is just that, hey, no such pattern can exist because it's not written down somewhere and you didn't find that sheet, which would be held internally anyway and which the administration wouldn't give up anyway. But that's really what they're going with. And that's what we have to point out here. You can certainly parse through the recording for yourself. I'll be happy to provide the link in the show notes. But this is the gist of what the attorney's saying and how the attorney is defending the federal government. All he's doing is trying to get the appeal on completely technical grounds. And there's more on the technicality in just a moment. But first, actually, yeah, let's get to that right now. So this portion really makes me laugh for a second, because what the attorney essentially ends up saying is that, hey, you know what? Not only is it the case that you all couldn't find a written directive for these unconstitutional practice of ours as the federal government, but also you didn't give us enough time to show you how we were in fact following the Constitution. Now, let me let you hear it for yourself, just to be sure.
Justify reasonable suspicion for the various stops that plaintiffs had identified in the declarations. And respectfully, I don't think the procedures that the district court employed were even close to adequate to allow for that kind of determination to be made. I mean, what happened here is the plaintiff spent weeks collecting dozens of anecdotes from across the district about particular stops that had occurred. And the district court said it was reasonable for them to take a month to put that all together. Fine. But then we got 2 business days to respond, not only to all of that, but also to the separate Fifth Amendment ex parte TRO that they filed at the same time. And in that kind of,
The plaintiffs say you got a week. Why is there a difference there?
it was Thursday night before the 4th of July weekend, and our response was due Tuesday at 5 p.m. So we had 2 business days and a long.
Okay, wow. So here, the attorney is saying, hey, we didn't get enough time to gather all the paperwork that we in fact had for these abductions. And that's just the most peculiar argument to make, because he's saying, hey, we're abiding by the Constitution. And yet if you were doing that, you would have paperwork everywhere, including warrants signed off on by a judge that you can basically reference anytime anyone is asking you for them. So how is it that the federal government can engage in this kind of practice, in this kind of policy, and yet have not enough time with 2 business days, and really 4, since this issue is supposed to be such a pertinent, such an urgent issue? If it's so important, then where is the paperwork to back up your practice? Where is the paperwork to show the entire world that what you're doing is entirely law-abiding? It's just so incredible. And these judges and Attorney Mohammed Tajzar, they have to respect the attorney, because that's a matter of law, it's a matter of custom, it's a matter of politeness and culture. But really, like, you're making an argument that I'd expect from an elementary school student somewhere. You're making an argument that doesn't work at face value, because you're supposed to have a paper trail there. That's the law, isn't it? And yet you're saying we didn't have enough time. It was the 4th of July weekend. So somehow hot dogs and overcooked cheeseburgers were more important than gathering the paperwork showcasing just how law-abiding your policy was. That is just unbelievable. It's just not believable. So now, with that in mind, let's move on to our next segment for analysis, which is a little more of the same. But you have to know that it's a little more of the same, because that's what this session consisted of. It was kind of the same defense over and over again, the same line, and somehow the court tried to wrap its mind around whether there was something more substantive there, but mostly to no avail. So let's go ahead and hear a little more from the attorney for the federal government, just for the record.
One. And so by the time of the stay motion, we were able to put in a declaration saying, by the way, the court was wrong about that one. It was a targeted operation. It was not a random people driving by and look, we see some people who appear Hispanic at the bus stop, let's pick them up. It was based on particular intelligence about that location.
Well, there was almost, well, you said that, but you didn't provide any evidence of who was being targeted or how we're supposed to know who was being targeted or what you knew or anything about it.
Right. It was a pretty general declaration, Your Honor, that's correct. But I think it's illustrative that if we had actually sufficient time to build a meaningful record on the particular stops,
but then you had filed a second stay motion in the district court and you still didn't file anything else.
It was with the second, this was with the second. The written stay motion is when we filed this declaration on the particular.
I thought you filed one with us and then you filed one, or maybe you filed one on a. I know you filed one with the district court before your first motion with us. I don't know that you filed a second one in the district court.
We filed a written stay motion first with this court that attached this declaration.
Right, and the same declaration was in the district court. There was not another declaration.
The same declaration we then refiled in the district court the next day.
So even though there were several more days, there was still no more.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow. So by the attorney's own admission, even though they had time to, once again, in his own words, show that there was particular information about the day laborers they stopped in Pasadena, no such information was provided in the formal reply. His defense here is, well, as we were trying to gather that info, we got blindsided. We, the federal government of the most powerful nation on earth, were blindsided by a second allegation on the Fifth Amendment, or regarding the Fifth Amendment, which was their denial of access to attorneys for the people they arrested and detained. That's his defense. So I'm just grateful for a second here that, like, we have this available for our own viewing, right? Because this is not NBC4 telling you what's happening in a 30-second soundbite. This is not CNN or Fox News essentially whitewashing the entire hearing for their own ratings. This is information that you can go ahead and look at for yourself. And when you scrutinize the info, when you scrutinize the defense, and you really think about what is being said, it is incredibly without grounds. It has such little standing, it should be dismissed immediately. But again, as a matter of respect, as a matter of politeness, let the other side make their case heard, because really they're just telling on themselves. And that's exactly what's happening here. The court is really trying to figure out how the government is going to defend itself, and yet the government, at least via this attorney, provides no adequate information for us to figure that one out. That's just what it is. So the attorney goes on for a little bit over the next couple minutes, and eventually one of the judges, Judge Gold, says, okay, you know what, with this, if this is kind of just going to go on, and if you're just going to go on these technical grounds for the most part, then let me just ask you, like, what we're really supposed to be doing here. What is at play here? And this is how the attorney responds.
Or Mr. Hodgers-Durgan, for any particular named plaintiff or named member of an organizational plaintiff, there's no basis to infer that that person is going to be subject to a suspicionless stop in the future, especially given the lack of any serious record evidence of a policy of doing this.
Counsel?
Yes.
Judge Gould, sorry to interject, but can you tell me the government's view of what is the principal issue that we have to decide today?
Thank you, Your Honor. I think there's two questions, really principal questions presented. One is the standing of the plaintiffs to seek this injunction, and the other is and I'm happy to pivot to this now, given the time is elapsing, are the Fourth Amendment merits of the injunction. Because I think even if you assume the district court did have jurisdiction and the plaintiffs had standing, this injunction on its face is impermissible under established law.
Is the only thing before us today whether that injunction is permissible?
Well, technically, the question is whether the court should stay that injunction pending appeal. So
that's what I thought it was.
Yes.
That it was a question of whether there could be a stay. Now,
That's right.
let me ask you another question. It's not precisely on that issue, but as you were answering Judge Berzon, for Judge Coe earlier, and saying something was not a policy, I just want to clarify as to what you mean by a policy. Is it, for example, a policy of the administration at this time to deport 3,000 persons per day?
Not to my knowledge, Your Honor. The policy that I think matters for purposes of this injunction and this motion to stay is there a policy of conducting detentive stops without reasonable suspicion?
Are you saying there is no policy to deport 3,000 people a day?
I'm not aware of any policy today. But I'm focused on the detentions, not the deportations, because this case is about detentions, not about deportations. And there's definitely no policy of conducting detentions without reasonable suspicion.
I don't think there was, there's no policy that says we're going to conduct.
So here, once again, the attorney for the federal government provides a non-answer to the question, right? Like when you get to say, I don't know if there is a policy to arrest 3,000 people a day, it's quite convenient, since given that you don't know, I guess we just have nothing to build on, right? But why are these judges asking about the arrests in the first place? I mean, it's a logical question. It's a logical question because what they're trying to figure out is why ICE decided to ramp up its operations as it did, when it did, and how it did, right? This is the investigative inquiry that we have to engage in as people of reason, as people in an organized society, in order to conclude an explanation for things. But the attorney here says, I don't know. And I don't know is just, it's a great non-answer on his part, because it just gives us nothing then. And we have to go ahead and find another way. We got to find another explanation for why about 3,000 people since June 6th have been detained all across Los Angeles County alone. Time when there isn't enough room, when there are not enough attorneys, when you have a president who is essentially looking to please his base with spectacular shows of force, sending the National Guard, subsuming control of the National Guard from the governor's office, from the local governor's office, to what end exactly? How are these things all connected? How do we contextualize them so that we can reason our way through what exactly is going on? The attorney says, I don't know. Don't ask me. I'm only here because there's a technicality I'd like to point out. All right. Okay. I accept that this is the defense of the federal government, or I'd want to say the sort of excuse of the federal government or by the federal government, because I know and have known, as a number of my peers and contemporaries out in Los Angeles have known just as well, that this whole debacle, this fiasco, this incredible and spectacular theater that has been put together and manufactured by Stephen Miller and his contemporaries out there, I know that it's based on nothing and that it's based on a lie. I should amend that to say that it's based on a lie. And it's here that you can see it for yourself. Because let me reiterate just one more time that the federal government did not deny the claims about the Fifth Amendment or the lack of access to an attorney for these detainees. They didn't deny that part. Throughout the rest of this hearing, the only thing the government is denying is that any such policy of racial profiling exists. They're incredulous that all these brown people have come out and said what you're doing is unconstitutional. Their position is, the federal government's position is, hey, what? Are you kidding me? All we're doing is following the Fourth and Fifth Amendments. All we're doing is abiding by the law. That's the whole point of this, right? Law and order. And yet, when the court or when the plaintiffs ask for the government to show that, to provide us with evidence that they're following the law, they say, well, we didn't get enough time. We didn't get enough time, and you have no standing. You took a handful of anecdotes, and not just a handful, hundreds, thousands of stories and documentations that are available for any one of us to parse through at this minute right now, and yet the attorney still has the gall. The federal government, I should say, has the gall to say, I don't know what you're talking about. It's all law abiding, and you should stay that temporary restraining order because it's not fair. That's what it's come down to. Now let's go ahead and take a look at one more clip, and then we'll just provide some final thoughts on all of this.
The nature of the totality of the circumstances analysis also precludes us from holding that certain factors are presumptively given no weight without considering those factors in the full context of each particular case.
That's not what I said, and that's not how I read the district court's order, saying those good presumptively no weight. They said those factors in and by themselves are just a broad profile that don't support reasonable suspicion, and that is consistent with both Valdez-Vega and our case law. But that still doesn't address my question. If that is correct as a matter of law, then it's conclusory for you to say we don't have a policy of violating the Fourth Amendment. The question is there enough evidence to show you have a policy of stopping based on information that doesn't amount to reasonable suspicion, that only amounts to a broad profile?
So let me answer that in two ways. Number one, factually, I don't think there's a basis in the record to say even that much, because I don't think we have any real information in the record from the government side of any particular stop. So we don't know what basis they had for any of these particular stops.
Where in your stay motion do you even make that argument? Your stay motion focused on standing and the terms, the vagueness of the TRO. I think in your opening stay motion, you had exactly one conclusory sentence about the merits of the district court's Fourth Amendment analysis, which arguably is a forfeiture of any attack on her specific findings or her conclusions of law on the Fourth Amendment.
Okay. So Your Honor, the reason this policy question has come up more so in the reply is because I understood plaintiff's response to the Lyons issue to be saying, oh, no, that's different. There's a policy here. Now, we don't think the district court made that finding, which is why we didn't attack it. But if the district court had made that finding, it would have been clearly erroneous given the lack of information in the record. That's different, though.
My understanding is that after the stay motion here, after the district court injunction here, the Secretary of Homeland Security said we're going to continue doing what we're doing.
Right,
so that's not a policy?
Well, the policy is to follow the Fourth Amendment and to require reasonable suspicion. And our point on the law is sort of distinct.
Is your policy not to use these four factors alone as sufficient to show reasonable suspicion? You haven't ever said that.
I don't think there's a policy either.
We didn't do it. We don't know what you're talking about. How on earth could you even begin to suggest that we would engage in racial dragnets in the United States of America in 2025? There's no record of that. America has always been great and is still great. Are you kidding me? That's what the attorney has essentially come out with in defense of the federal government and its conduct throughout Los Angeles County since June 6th. And I just want you to know that. I just want you to know that for not just your own reference, but as a matter of law and the state of law in the United States, which is really the state of lawlessness. Because if the federal government, if Big Brother gets to engage in this for communities in urban cities everywhere, be they in LA, be they in Chicago, be they in New York, if the federal government can do that, send in their military and its subsidiaries and get away with it, because according to them, they are the federal government and their law supersedes all other law, including that of the constitutions. If they can do that here right now in 2025, then just wait until those Medi-Cal benefits begin to fade away fast in the rural counties and see what that looks like then, right? The federal government lagged in its response to Kerrville. I think it was about 3 days officially, where over 100 lives were lost, unnecessarily so. Military personnel were found in Los Angeles County, right in my neck of the woods, in MacArthur Park, grandstanding, showing force, when what they needed to be doing was supporting recovery efforts all through Kerrville County. If the largest, most powerful military in the world is going to be spending its time in the urban centers, making a show of force, while people, be they white, black, or so-called Hispanic Americans in the rural counties, are badly, desperately in need of critical support during a time of crisis, then that's what you need to know about the current state of law or lawlessness in America and how the federal government defends that. Before we conclude, just remember that the TRO has another hearing by around September 24th. That doesn't mean that ICE won't engage in questionable behavior between now and then. So there will certainly be more from yours truly as to what that actually looks like. And remember that this is not about immigrants alone. This is not about Los Angeles alone. This is about all of us and what we do in the face of fascism in the 21st century as it has manifested. And I think that you should definitely let your community know, let your neighbors know, and certainly let the city know. It's J. T.